Yo, what's good? It's me, the Razuddin, and inshallah, in today's video, I'm going to be talking about Taqwa, and I'm going to dive straight into it as well. So, with Taqwa, it's mentioned in various parts of the Quran, but I think the most notable one for me has to be when Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, O you who believe, fasting is prescribed upon you as it was prescribed upon those before you, so that you may gain Taqwa. A misconception that I've realized while growing up is a lot of people think that the reason why we fast is to empathize with the poor and the miskin, to feel what they feel when they have to endure times of hunger and thirst. Although that is a good outcome of fasting, it's not the main reason why we fast during Ramadan. The main reason why we fast is obviously, as Allah said, to gain taqwa. So what taqwa is it's the consciousness and the fear that one has of Allah. Umar, the companion, he asked another companion, what is taqwa? To which that companion asked him if he's ever treaded a thorny path. Umar said that he has. The companion asked Umar, what did you do? Umar said he folded up his garments and treaded carefully. And that's exactly what it is. It's being cautious of all the haram that's out there and trying your very best to stay away from it for Allah's sake. But then also seeing all the good that's out there, all the good that you can contribute to for Allah's sake and doing it. So it's staying away from everything that Allah has forbidden and enjoying the good that Allah loves to be enjoyed. But the key differentiator between that and just doing a normal act of goodness or evil is having taqwa, being mindful of Allah while you do it. Because non-believers, they're also capable of doing good and bad. They can do both as well, just like how Muslims can. But then, like I said, the key differentiator is having taqwa. Like a non-believer, he could be doing something good for his own selfish reason, or he could generally just be doing it for the good of that person. He wants to do good for a person. It depends on the person's intention. But with a Muslim, they're the ones who have taqwa while doing it. With believers and non-believers, some of the laws are different. Us Muslims, we believe some things that non-Muslims believe, but then they may think some things are acceptable that we don't think is acceptable. Like for them, for example, they can go about listening to music. For them, it doesn't really matter. It's not haram for them. So obviously, taqwa is not going to be a question for them. They're just going to listen to it. They're not even going to think, oh wait, this is haram, because they're not even Muslim. But with a Muslim, he has the knowledge that music is haram, and also he's Muslim and he has taqwa. So through that, he may be inclined to listen to music, but then he might remember Allah, and because of that fear of Allah, he might stay away from it. But even if he progresses to listening to music, he still had that thought, Allah's watching me, so that's still taqwa, although he let his desires get the best of him though. But he was still cautious for a brief moment, although even though he failed. So yeah, that's the key differentiator between taqwa and just doing acts of goodness and staying away from acts of evil. There's a lot of verses, like I said before, that I mentioned in the Quran, but I picked out a few that I want to read out. So all these verses that I'm about to read, they don't all mention taqwa. Most of them do, but some of them demonstrate it as well. Anyways, so in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah says, be just, that is nearer to righteousness, and fear Allah. Indeed, He is knowing of what you do. Surah An-Anfal, O you who believe, if you fear Allah, He will grant you a criterion and will remove from you your misdeeds. Surah Al-Imran, O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and die not except in the state of Islam. Surah Zumar, say indeed, the losers are the ones who will lose themselves and their families on the day of resurrection. Unquestionably, that is the manifest lost. They will have layers of fire above and below them. That is what Allah warns His servants with, so fear me, O my servants. In another verse in Surah Zumar, Allah says, Allah has sent down the best message, a book of perfect consistency and repeated lessons, which causes the skin of those who fear their Lord to tremble. Then their skin and hearts soften at the mention of Allah. That is the guidance of Allah, through which He guides whoever He wills. In Surah Maryam, when Allah was talking about Jahannam, He mentions, "And there is none of you except that He will come to it. This is upon your Lord and inevitability decreed. Then will save those who fear their Lord and leave the wrongdoers within it on their knees." So with this last verse, it's like very clear the two groups of people. It's the group that fears Allah and the group that doesn't fear Allah. Allah says He's going to save those that fear Him. He didn't really mention anything else in that verse. I mean, Allah knows best to why that is, but what He did mention is He will save those that fear their Lord. They're the ones who are going to get saved. So then, obviously, the other group that stays on their knees didn't fear their Lord, and that's why they're in Jahannam. I think something that's very important for me to establish is I did realize I did mention fear a lot. I mentioned fear a lot of times. Allah says to fear Him in many of the verses that I mentioned. I think it's important to say though that Allah, I'm not sure exactly if He's the one who said it or the Prophet said this about Allah, but what's certain is that Allah's mercy encompasses His wrath, and Allah is the most merciful of the merciful. He's more merciful than our parents, more merciful than the people who have been around us, who have, I guess, acted like parental figures. He's the most merciful of the merciful, Again, so when it comes to fear though, like I feel like it has a negative connotation, which I can understand why that is, but fear is like it's necessary. It's necessary. I mean, it depends on who's imposing that fear, yeah. Because you can abuse, people being scared of you. You can certainly abuse that sort of power. But in a lot of cases, though, it is necessary. When you think about all the people that you're around while growing up, your friends, your family, your relatives, maybe your teachers, maybe your co-workers, people at your community, maybe people at your gym. Think about everyone that you know while growing up. Out of all of them, who did you fear the most? Who were you scared of the most? It's most likely your parents, right? You feared them more than anyone else. But then again, those same groups of people, everyone you grew up around, your friends, family, relatives, people at the community, gym, etc. Out of all these people, who did you love the most? Your parents, So if fear is such an evil thing, if having fear is such a bad thing, why is it the people that you fear the most was coincidentally the people that you love the most? You see, it's not a coincidence, And the thing is, that fear that you have of them, it's justified, And if you didn't know it when you were younger, you know it now, There's no one that had more authority over you when you were growing up, or maybe even to this day, than your parents. They had more rules imposed on you. You had more things that you had to follow, and if you break those rules, you had to suffer the consequences, whether it was getting grounded, your device getting taken away, whatever it was, But that fear that you had of them because of breaking the rules, you knew, what's it called? It was justified. Like, it was good for you to fear them. And why is that? Like, okay, like, again, like if what's it called? What was I gonna say? There's many examples, Obviously, a parent, they have to bring you up, into a good man or a good woman. So how can that be possible if they don't have rules? It's not gonna happen, Like, you could get in trouble for going out past your curfew. That's a rule you can't break. You could get in trouble for getting bad grades. You could get in trouble for misbehaving in the classroom. You could get in trouble for starting fights in the classroom. You could get in trouble for being disrespectful to people on the streets, and that escalating to something bigger, You could get in trouble for speeding, going over the speed limit. You could get in trouble for taking your parents' car without permission. You could get in trouble for speaking to your siblings disrespectfully. You could be in trouble for not doing your homework. These are some things that I'm thinking about right now. But obviously, the list goes on, and it's bigger than what I can think of right now, because it's like I'm not a parent. I'm not the one, who's what's it called, had to impose these rules on my child or whatever. It's like a parent is more aware of these rules, of what they need to do to make their son or their daughter grow up to become a fine man or a fine woman. A respectful man and a respectful woman, a good man and a good woman. So yeah, I can't think of everything, but those are some examples. Obviously, if you were to have a kid, you do similar things. You wouldn't want them messing about with the wrong people or doing bad in school, this and that. And the reason for that is, if you do those things, you're just gonna grow up to become a bum. That's all it is. So these things are necessary. You know, like a kid, or a young person, they may not like eating healthy. They may want to eat a lot of junk food and this and that, but it's the parent that makes sure they're getting the nutrition. It's the parent that's making sure they're eating healthy. You know, that kid, they may not necessarily fear their friends. So with their friends, they're gonna be their true selves. They're gonna do whatever the heck they want. They're gonna eat as much junk food as they want. They're gonna go out. They're gonna party, this and that. They don't fear their friends. They don't fear disappointing them, and the friends don't care as much, about their upbringing or whatever, right? So there's no need to fear their friends, and that's why they're doing all these things. If the parent were to act like that, that kid's gonna grow up to become a bum. Okay, like I said, if that kid, wanted to eat all the junk food in the world, and he wasn't scared about, disappointing his parents or going out of his way to get junk food and this and that, he's gonna become fat. It's like he's gonna become obese. If he's just eating everything that he wants to eat, he's just fulfilling his desire, he's gonna go up to become fat. He's gonna go up to become lazy. That's what the parent is trying to avoid. That's what the parent is trying to prevent. And it's the same with all these other rules. The parent is trying to prevent these other things. Say, for example, a kid, he gets told by his parents all the time, don't speed and drive. Don't speed and drive. The kid, he thinks he's a freaking racer. He thinks he's a drifter. He doesn't want to listen to his parents because he thinks he knows better. Let's say, what's it called? He doesn't listen to his mom because he's arrogant and he thinks he knows better, even though the mom or the dad knows better. So then one day he goes out speeding in the car, and is speeding around. He could be speeding and he could be exceptional at drifting and whatever for 30 whole minutes. But then in 20 seconds, he just killed somebody. In 20 seconds, he could be the best driver in the world. In 20 seconds, because he wanted to break his parents' rule and the rule of the law, the laws of Australia, he wanted to go speed above the limit. Now, in those 20 seconds only, someone's dead. Doesn't matter how good of a driver he is. He's going to be asking himself in the future, was it really worth it speeding? Obviously not, because now someone's dead because of him. And even, okay, say he avoided that person. Let's take it back 20 seconds. The 20 seconds prior, he thought to himself, let me just stop speeding for a bit. And then he sees the person and they cross safely. They don't get hit by the car, right? And then he continues on. What if he wants to speed again? He speeds again for another 20 minutes. And in that 21st minute, he loses control of the vehicle. Everyone in the car perishes. Everyone's gone. You see? It's like, was it worth it? He didn't fear his friends. Obviously, his friends probably encouraged it. Let's speed, let's do this, let's do that. And now they're all dead. Now they're all suffering the consequence. You see that? They didn't fear the friends. He didn't fear the friends. That's why he's kind of dead right now. I mean, Allah knows best. But because he didn't fear his friends, he sped and now he's dead. But if he feared his parents and he listened to the rules, or maybe he feared the law, that person that he could have killed would have been safe. And even that person that, was safe, and he ended up killing himself, he would have been safe himself. He wouldn't have died, and he wouldn't have killed his friends in the vehicle as well. So that's just one example of many, 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 many. The list goes on. It's countless. And it's similar to like a movie with really good lessons, A Bronx Tale, this friend, what am I saying, this friend? This person, like, he had a bunch of friends, right? And these friends, they're all bad. Since they were youngins, these kids, they're all bad, saying the N-word. They weren't black. Saying the N-word, doing bad stuff. They were racist, this and that. And then they grew up and they're still doing the same antics. And this kid that grew up, his name's Sonny, and the movie's called A Bronx Tale. He grew up and His friends, he knew they were a bad influence, but because of peer pressure, he wasn't able to step up for himself and say, this is wrong. This is not right. But then he had a father figure whose name was Sonny. And Sonny always told him to stay away from these kids. He told him they're bad news, they're trouble. They're going to end up dead or in jail. So he was constantly at, telling Sonny to stay away from these people. Then one day he was in a car with these guys and they said they're going to go blow up. They're going to go throw Molotovs at a black convenience store. And Sonny was in the car. He didn't want to go there. He said he didn't want to be there. He didn't tell them that. It was internal. He didn't want to be there, but at the same time, he didn't want to say anything. But then out of nowhere, Sonny pulls up and he tells, he tells C, which is the name of this kid, he tells him to get out the car. He told him that he doesn't want him around these guys. And these other guys, they left. They continued with their mission. They threw Molotovs at the place, but then one of the Molotovs, it didn't break. They were throwing it at the people and at the store, and they were like ducking everything, but one of it didn't break. And a black person picked that up and he threw it back at the car and went through the window. And they were trying to put out the fire, and then it fell on the other Molotovs, and then boom, the whole car explodes. Every one of them died, except for Sonny, because he left that car, because his parental figure came and told him not to hang out with these guys. And he was grateful. He was so grateful, and he wanted to go tell Sonny about what he saved him from. But yeah, like I said, the list goes on. There's so many rules. And out of everyone it's probably your parent that has the most amount of rules on you, or had the most amount of rules on you growing up. But it was for a reason, And if you were smart enough, you know it back then. And if you're smart now, you know it now, And it's the same with Allah. It's exactly the same with Allah, and that's why we love Allah. But at the same time, that's why we need to feed Him, We need to feed Him to stay away from these haram things, Taqwa is essential. And like I said, and like I proved, fear is not necessarily bad. It can be a good thing, So think about it, It's like He told us to stay away from gambling. How many people have destroyed their lives gambling? He tells us to stay away from unjust aggression. How many people have destroyed their lives because of that? He tells us to stay away from arrogance. How much arrogance has killed people? Literally, Especially in bad neighborhoods in America. Everyone thinks they're the man and they end up dead, like freaking the next day. It's like a cycle. It's like these guys are idiots. They can't see, oh, wait, what the heck? This guy was talking all tough, and now he's dead. Now I'm going to talk to... Like, you're going to end up in the grave as well, It's that arrogance that makes them act like that, How many people have perished because of that? Or dumb decisions, Allah told us to restrain our anger. How many people have ruined their lives because of anger? Allah told us to stay away from loans, interest-based loans. How many people have destroyed their lives financially because they got into riba? Allah tells us to not be anywhere near the opposite sex unless it's mandatory, or unless it's like someone that we're related to, that we're allowed to be around. How many people... Because Allah told us to lower our gaze. How many people have ruined their lives because they didn't lower their gazes? And it starts from that. It starts from looking. Obviously, it goes from looking to being around them, from being around them to touching them, to being in private. And you know what? It all starts because they didn't lower their gaze. And a lot of people, like, you hear this, I cheated on him. I didn't expect to do this. I never thought I would do this. Obviously, no one ever thinks they're going to cheat, But it starts off by looking. That's why you never expected it. You didn't expect it to progress so fast, to the point where you ended up doing zina. That's how it works, And shaitan's the third person with you in the room, and before you know it, you're doing the act, And that's why you never expected it. That's why you never expected to do it, because you didn't realize you had to lower your gaze. That's where it starts, And prevention is the best cure. You don't wait till something bad happens to you to start complaining. Oh my, why? I can't believe I did this, right? No. As soon as the thought comes to your head, you stop it immediately. You cut it off. So yeah, Allah does this because He loves us. And there's many, many more examples in the Quran. He tells us not to do bribery, He tells us not to do false testimony. How many people destroy their lives because they do these things, when they get found out? He tells us not to gossip. There was an example, there's an example that I have when I was younger, when I was working at McDonald's. There was a group chat. And in this group chat, it was a private one. A lot of people were just talking crap about managers and other workers. So many people saying the most diabolical things. You know, me, I kept my mouth shut. You know, and why did I keep my mouth shut? Allah. So that's an example of taqwa. You know, I know that what's called Allah doesn't want me doing this stupid thing, so I kept my mouth shut. And then what happens? Inevitably, the group chat gets leaked, and everyone in that group chat that used to talk smack, they're all panicking now. They're all scared. They're all saying, "I'm gonna lose my job." You know, this and that. Some people quit before they even had to confront the manager. You know, but who wasn't stressing? Who wasn't panicking? Me. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't stressing. I was sleeping like a baby because I knew I didn't do anything wrong. I knew that I followed Allah's law. I didn't gossip. I didn't backbite. Nothing. I stayed away from it. I kept my mouth shut. You know, that's a perfect example of why Allah wants us staying away from certain things and doing certain things, because He knows the outcomes. He knows what can happen if you don't listen. You know, so fear is necessary. You know, another good example is in Surah Yusuf. You know, Yusuf obviously was a handsome prophet and everything, and his what's it called? The person that he was under, like he was a servant of a woman and a man. I forgot her name, but anyways, what she wanted him to do was obviously zina, you know, and the doors and everything. She shut the doors, made sure they were double locked. No one was gonna come in. No one was gonna see what they're doing. They were all by themselves, and she called him to zina. She said, "Come you." But what did Yusuf say? Prophet Yusuf said, "I seek refuge in Allah." He said, "I seek refuge in Allah." And I think there's another verse that said he would have been tempted to do it if he didn't see the signs of his Lord. So what was it that kept him from doing the haram act? And people can say, "Oh yeah, you know, if I'm in that situation, I'm saying no. You know, I'm not doing it, this and that, you know." Like, you can say that, but the thing is, you haven't been tested with that. You don't know what it's like. You know? Yusuf knew what that was like, though. He knew what that was like. And the thing is, your mindset, you're saying, "Oh, I wouldn't do this now." Your mindset is going to be different to when you're seeing that in front of you. Your mindset, it's not going to be the same. Your level of iman is not going to be the same. Yusuf said, "I seek refuge in Allah." That's an example of taqwa. He remembered Allah in that moment straight away. He remembered Allah, and that's what made him run to the door. That's what made him run to the door, because he remembered Allah, taqwa. But what happens if you don't follow what's it called? What happens if you don't fear Allah and you don't have taqwa? Is in Surah Ash-Shu'ara, Surah Ash-Shu'ara. I'm pretty sure that's the surah. That's how you pronounce it. Many verses were talking about the different prophets and what they were telling their people to do. Like Prophet Noah, what did he say to his people that were worshipping the stones? He said, "Fear Allah and obey me." The same as who else? Prophet Shu'aib. The people that were being corrupt, not measuring things properly. I think taking land without right. I'm not sure if it's exactly that, but they were basically a corrupt people, and they were basically shifty, and I think shifty businessmen, you know, not doing things the way they should be done. What did Shu'aib say? He said, "Fear Allah and obey me." You know, the same as the people of Ad in that same surah, "Fear Allah and obey me." I think Saleh, the same thing. He said, "Fear Allah and obey me." And I think some other prophets said the same thing. People of Lut, the people doing haram stuff with men, you know. What did Lut say? "Fear Allah and obey me." You see? And they didn't fear Allah. That's why all these people, they got destroyed. They didn't fear Allah. This is why fear of Allah is necessary. And there's one thing, if there's one thing that I really despise, it's people nowadays that say, "Oh, we don't want to fear Allah. We just want to love Allah. Oh, I love Allah, this and that. You know, I don't like talking about fear. I just want to love." These people that talk about just loving Allah and not doing stuff because they don't fear, they don't want to fear Allah and this and that. These people, you never even see them take the deen seriously. These people, they talk about how much they love Allah, this and that. They can't even wake up for Fajr. Bro, that's like the bare minimum. Waking up for Fajr, doing your 5-day prayers is it's the bare minimum as a Muslim. They can't even do that. Why? Because they don't have enough fear in Allah. Yeah, they love Allah. Oh, I love Allah. You can't even wake up for Fajr. You know? Allah does so much stuff for you that I won't even be able to count them all. And you can't even get up for Fajr. You can't even get up, do for 5 minutes and pray Fajr for him. And you're claiming that you love him. You see, this is what happens, bro. They become delusional. They think all they need is love, love, love. And then when you talk about fear and you talk about Jahannam and these things that they need to hear, they call you extremist. Who's being extreme? The person who's doing what Allah told him to do, or the person who's not doing what Allah told him to do? You're being extreme in transgression. You know? Like, you'll never see these people take the deen seriously. You know, they go out, they do this, they talk to girls. They take it so lightly. Why? There's no fear. There's no fear. But then the people that I know that actually take deen seriously, and they're very humble, and they're very charitable, even though they don't have that much money. And they're always enjoining good. They care about Islam, they care about people, the welfare of them, everything. And they actually do their prayers, the bare minimum. These people, they actually have fear in Allah. These people actually have taqwa, they have fear in Allah, and they love Allah. So it's essential to love and fear Allah. If you don't, then you're just going to become a bum, you're going to become a loser. And by loser, I mean you're going to lose your akhirah if you don't fear Allah in this dunya. You're going to lose.